Hello FPL managers and welcome to Fantasy Football Hub's Game Week 2 predicted lineups, injuries and team news video with me, James, and the injury expert in the FPL sphere, Mr. Ben Dinnery. Ben, how are you doing?
Very, very good, James. It's great to be back. Really enjoyed Game Week 1. Results aside, it was just good to see supporters back in the ground.
Fun,
almost the results, I dare say, played second fiddle to the crowd, the atmosphere, and just like I say, the excitement of having Premier League football back.
It was great, wasn't it? Yeah, a jubilant weekend for all football fans. How did Dinnery's differentials get on in Game Week 1?
For me, and that the caveat is for me, I thought I'd done really, really well. I hit 82 points.
Okay.
So not great. The captaincy choice was a Salah and Bruno coin toss, so I did lose a couple of points on going with Salah, but I'm happy with the decision in and around that. And I didn't pick that team necessarily for Game Week 1. There was definitely a few players within that squad who I had me eye on going forward, and I firmly believe nobody will talk me off it. Christian Benteke will come good, and I firmly expect him to start this weekend with Mateta getting axed by Patrick Vieira.
Matata, mate. You say...
Potato to patata.
No, fair enough. You know what? I support your Benteke pick, but we're not here to talk about your picks. Otherwise, we could be here all day analysing the reasoning behind your strange differential backs. Instead, we're here to talk Game Week 2, team news, injuries and updates. And we're going to be using Ben's Game Week 2 predicted lineups article on Fantasy Football Hub. You have to be a member to access all of it. And as I've said before, this is a live document. It is updated regularly and will, by the time we get to that Game Week 2 deadline, be completely up to date with the freshest injury information. At the moment, we're recording on a Thursday, so things could change after the recording of this video. But of course, if you are on this document, and I will link it below, you can find out all of the latest updates. So without further ado, Ben, if you're ready, we will start, as we always do, with Arsenal. And a surprise coming pretty late in the game, in Game Week 1, when it was revealed Lacazette and Aubameyang were ill and would miss Game Week 1's fixture. That must have blindsided you a bit, Ben.
Yeah, this was a story that broke just on Friday afternoon. I think it was David Ornstein that broke that story. And yeah, it was huge. Aubameyang and Lacazette both, omitted from that travelling squad due to illness. No specifics, very little mentioned from Mikel Arteta. As we've seen with a lot of the club around confidentiality and disclosure, if it's COVID related, clubs are leaving it up to their players, or without the player's permission to announce if it is COVID related. So we haven't had any official confirmation of what that illness is. But given the complexities of the current situation and how sudden their withdrawal was, and you would expect with the Aubameyang and Lacazette to be in fairly close quarters with each other on the training pitches, reading between the lines, this could be COVID related, and if so, then we wouldn't expect either of those players to be involved this weekend either.
Aubameyang, am I right in thinking that he's actually had COVID before?
Yes, I mean, in our examples, several examples of players having multiple positive COVID tests. There was a player in Serie A during the first pandemic who had actually been tested positive on 4 separate occasions. Wow. So just because you've been double jabbed, or just because you've got the antibodies, that does not mean you kind of have that contract the virus again. But hopefully, what it does mean is the severity of the actual virus will not be as bad.
Yeah, and I see that Saka is now predicted to start for you. You rightly called that he would be benched in their Game Week 1 tie against Brentford. He did get bought on, only 1 point for his owners, but we must remember that his ownership is still quite substantial, so that will be music to FPL managers' ears, I'm sure, to see that he's back in Ben's predicted lineup. Let's see if he starts. All right, let's move on to Aston Villa. Ben, and I suppose the big talking point here is the fact that Watkins missed game week 1. You're expecting him to start in game week 2.
Yeah, he was. We had an update on Friday morning, which went along the lines of if he can train pain-free on Friday afternoon, then he will be cleared and he will be in the squad. If he can't, then he won't be risked. And that was the case. It's an impact injury, bruising to the patella, the kneecap. So this is about pain management. And because it's so early on in the season, you sort of question, we don't need to really take any risks, but we do know, or I certainly do know, that Ollie Watkins has trained, and we're very confident that he will be involved this weekend. Now, for me, could have potentially a big impact on Villa, because what it allows Dean Smith to do is change maybe from a 4-2-3-1, the formation that he predominantly adopted when Jack Grealish was in the team, to switch to a 4-4-2. It's more fluid in that formation, and that would see a two-pronged attack, and that would see Danny Ings paired with Ollie Watkins for the first time in the Premier League.
Yeah, it could be an exciting duo to keep an eye on for sure. They did really seem to miss Watkins in that game against Watford. Didn't really create much at all. I think the 2 goals were actually quite flattering. Brentford, any updates here?
Christophe Ager was forced off. Had a 50-50 challenge with Kieran Deeney that he sort of bent the ankle outwards. He did play on with that for around about 10 to 12 minutes, but ultimately the decision was made by Thomas Franks to withdraw him. Just the fact that the mechanism of injury and that he played on suggest and indicate that is not serious. So, I think it's a little bit of ice on that. And he should be absolutely fine. And if that's the case, I would expect Brentford to be unchanged.
And again, Mbeumo there predicted to start up top with Tony. What a great out of position 5.5 million midfielder that he could end up being if he continues his championship form. Brighton, and I guess the big talking point here, we were discussing it just before recording, Ben, is the absence of Ventman, very popular amongst the Twitter sphere. What's the latest on Ventman?
Yeah, I mean, we've already heard from Graham Potter that there are no fresh injury concerns for Brighton heading into this weekend's game. But unfortunately, there are no returners. Joel Ventman was one of those players. Again, his admission was late, and this is the COVID-related times that we live in. He was identified as a close contact. Now, I spoke earlier on in the week potentially about this player's status and his possibility of returning if he had been double jabbed, for example, given the change in government guidance. Now, it looks as if he mustn't be, because Graham Potter said, that he isn't available for this weekend's game, and that may have a knock-on effect also maybe going into game week 3. So depending on how Brighton perform and ultimately what levels of fitness he comes back with, it may be after the international break when we see Joel Ventman back in that Brighton squad.
Okay, what it does mean is that for the meantime we can expect Duffy to continue to start in that background. Of course, Duffy 4 million, I believe as well. He had the highest XG of Brighton's defenders in game week 1-2, so he could be a potential short-term option, perhaps if you're playing that early wild card. Let's talk about Burnley now, Ben. Probably don't need to spend too long on these guys. Any updates at all?
Yeah, so Kevin Long had an Achilles problem. Dale Stevens had surgery on his ankle. But we're no closer to a return. And in truth anyway, they're fringe players on the peripherals of that Burnley squad. So you wouldn't really expect them to be pushing for a place in that starting 11, even when they are fully fit.
No, I can't see those names popping up on your timeline too regularly as we approach Game Week 2's deadline. A team that may well be popping up on your timeline, Ben, is Chelsea. Now we saw Alonso start ahead of Chilwell in game week 1, and you've got in your predicted 11 here that you think that will probably continue. Also, of course, Lukaku's name makes the predicted lineup for the first time this season as well. Let's firstly start with Chilwell. Is this just a case of Alonso having a good game in game week 1, scoring that wonderful free kick, and you think for the meantime he'll be preferred?
It's fitness related as well. Ben Chilwell is a late returner, so he is gradually getting himself back up to speed. The biggest concern heading into game week 1 for me was Marcos Alonso actually played 120 minutes in the Super Cup. And if Thomas Tuchel was confident enough in Ben Chilwell's ability to be able to tolerate the game for 90 minutes, then he would have been straight in there. So to me, that's an indication that he's just not at that right level yet. But of course, we've seen the performance from Marcus Alonso, and he will be in there on merit as well.
And Romelu Lukaku starting, this will be, I'm sure Chelsea fans are incredibly excited to see Lukaku in action. What's the latest with him, Ben? How long has he had with that Chelsea side?
Well, he actually joined his new teammates from Tuesday.
Okay.
So he's got a good few days under his belt. Now, this is a potential game changer for Chelsea, European champions, and it's an opportunity for them to really lay down a marker in the league. Underperformed their XG last season, due primarily to Timo Werner. You add Romelu Lukaku, who has a point to prove. He's a different animal from the one that left the Premier League at Manchester United and Chelsea. And for me, although it's a little bit of a risk or a calculated gamble, I think Romelu Lukaku starts, and I think he hits the ground running. And, if you've got the funds available to bring him in, I'd be going big. For me, Lukaku as big as Chelsea as potentially Harry Kane would be at Manchester City.
Does he make Dinnery's differentials for Gameweek 2?
The problem is he comes in at a big price in FPL, which is the worry. I'm probably going to have to wait until a wild card, really, and I will be doing an early wild card as I normally do. Maybe in and around either the first or the second international break, when we've had enough of a big data set to sort of glean those insights. But Romelu Lukaku is on my radar, and if he had been available last weekend, he would have been in from the off, regardless of obviously whether he started or came on from the bench.
Okay, big words from the Big Din. Crystal Palace, Ben Teke, of course, making the starting 11 there, Ben. Very exciting times for you. Anything that you want to elaborate on when it comes to Palace?
Only the talk around Michael Olise. The expectations that he's arrived, he's going to be the new Eze, came from Reading with a big reputation, but hasn't featured at all due to a persistent back problem. Now, Patrick Vieira said that he's due back on the training pitches, hopefully before the international break. So maybe a return or involvement from game week 4 onwards.
Thank you very much. Everton. And I think maybe the biggest surprise in that Everton side was that, of course, we saw Richarlison return to the club after just winning gold medal at the Olympics. So he hit the ground running, didn't he, as well, Ben? There is talk, however, that Richarlison's going to need a rest at some point. I mean, he's barely had a pre-season. What are your thoughts? What would you say to those FPL managers who are potentially weighing up bringing him in?
Absolutely, first and foremost, there will become a point, and the easiest analogy I can put together, if you could imagine fatigue as being a bucket and a tap of dripping water that constantly just sort of tops it up, and as you go into those game weeks, that water levels rise, and ultimately there will be a point where it overflows, and the player is then flagged as being in that red zone, or they pull a soft tissue or a muscular injury, become at greater risk of injury incidents. So, coming off the back of Copa America and the Olympics, he's had very little rest in there. So there will be points where Richarlison will need to be managed. But I think just the gravity of the situation, the pressure that Rafa was maybe under, first game at home, needed to get off to a good start, given, I suppose, a controversy around his recruitment. And look, it's paid off early doors, but it is one to certainly watch. I think for me, Richarlison is a good pick early doors because he feels as if he owes the manager something. They had the belief and the confidence and allowing him to go to these 2 international tournaments, and he wants to come back and repay them and almost show that he's not affected by that summer of work. So I think the likes of DCL and Richarlison are good picks for Everton early doors, although I'm not totally enamoured by the Toffees team overall.
Yeah, okay, fair enough. Yeah, 1 goal, 1 assist for Richarlison. Calvert-Lewin also getting on a score sheet. Leeds United, very, very exciting game if you weren't a Leeds United fan. Of course, lost 5-1 in Gameweek 1. I always see Leeds as a pretty sturdy, dependable team when it comes to starting 11s. Ben, must be one of the easier ones to predict as far as you're concerned.
Yeah, in terms of a starting 11, yes, but in a formation and setup and how Bielsa will go, it can be a little bit of a lottery. For this one, I'm hoping that Firpo is fit enough to start. He can go on left. That releases maybe Dallas. And also we're hoping that Calvin Phillips will be ready to start the game. Of course, he wasn't involved at all. He was an unused substitute at Old Trafford, and that was purely based on the fact that he had only had 2 45-minute run-outs during Leeds' pre-season campaign because of his involvement at the Euros. So a lot of this depends on those two players being fit, but we're talking about another week of training and load in their legs, and I'm going to take a little bit of a punt based on that result at Old Trafford, and I'm starting both players.
Yeah, and we know the kind of impact that Phillips has on Leeds as well. If you look at the win percentages for Leeds with and without Phillips, it's quite a stark contrast there. So he really is crucial if Leeds are going to be successful this season. Leicester City, lots of questions around Maddison's injury status. Ben, do we have an update on that front?
Brendan Rodgers described it as a whack to the lower back. And when he was talking in his post-match press conference, he alluded to the fact that, yes, he had this knock. It didn't impair Maddison too much, although he was complaining of soreness, and his withdrawal seemed to be more of a tactical switch. He wanted more energy, he wanted more speed through the transitions and the lines, and that's why Maddison came off. So if we know injuries can evolve over 24 to 48 hours, but let's assume it is just a knock and it did hamper Maddison only slightly, then he should be absolutely fine.
Is Iheanacho a bit part player for Leicester City once more?
It's Jamie Vardy and one other, and if Brendan Rodgers decides to go with a 4-2-3-1 and Vardy is your front man, then he's always going to get the nod. If he decides to change things up, potentially, and I think he's went with 3-4-3s or even a 4-4-2 or a 3-1-4-2 on occasions, then Iheanacho should be there just slightly ahead of Daka, but he's a risky punt. I mean, you need to keep a little bit of faith, I think, with Kelechi, just based on what he brought last season. Probably his best form for Leicester, and he maybe deserves more than a 1 week punt, but it's difficult to see him getting some regular game time, and it may be the arrival of Vestergaard could potentially change things. We obviously have Castagna as well, who has been training with the team, so there's a lot of flexibility in there. He could bring Castagna in, Pereira could move up. So Rodgers isn't afraid to change that setup, and if he does go with two, then I would expect Iheanacho to partner Jamie Vardy. And
budget defender Amati still makes your predicted 11 for game week 2. Does that mean it's too soon for Vestergaard?
This is one that I'll be watching very, very closely. I'm a little bit old school when it comes to picking starting 11s, where I believe in, if you're keeping a clean sheet and you're playing well and you're winning, then you deserve your place in the team regardless of who's been bringing in. Now, Leicester came off the back of that Community Shield win. They kept another clean sheet against Wolves, and therefore I'm a little bit reluctant to change things too much. But, like I say, I'll listen to what Brendan Rodgers has to say, and it may be that Vestergaard does come into the team, or maybe, Rodgers feels, Amati deserves his chance and Vestergaard will just have to bide his time.
Yeah, I like that, Ben. I like that old school approach. Liverpool, and once again, Jota makes the starting 11. You were bang on in their Norwich fixture. Firmino, of course, benched for the first 60 minutes, came on and scored, which does throw a bit of doubt in the air over Jota's starting berth, but Ben has him here. I do want to talk about Tsimikas, because it looks, Ben, like his days could be numbered.
I mean, that was always the case. It was certainly never a long-term injury with Andy Robertson,
Sure.
although we were never able to sort of pin him down to a specific timeline, because he just never gets injured. So we don't know how he responds to treatment. You know, he's a fairly robust player. And those video slow-mos of the ankle injury in the final pre-season game always look worse than they actually are. Jurgen Klopp indicated that he was maybe targeting a return at game week 3, or if Liverpool are doing well and Tsimikas is doing well, then maybe, you know, there's no harm in actually holding Robertson back to game week 4. There's always a spanner in the work when players come out and either say something or, in this case, show a shot from the training ground and Robertson is running. Now, you know, these types of photographs send the Twitter community into overdrive, the rumour mill, but let's take it for what it is. It's one isolated shot of Andy Robertson training what appears to be individually, what appears to be running straight line only, and you know, at this stage of his injury and recovery, we would expect that. The problems don't come about until he starts getting involved in that contact and he starts those twisting, those multi-directional changes of movement. That's when the problems come about. So certainly and we never 100%, but as far as I'm concerned and from what we know and the injury itself, I would say we've got Tsimikas locked in for game week 2 at least. And then, we'll reevaluate as we head into game week 3.
I'll take that. If he can get another price rise as well, he'll go up to 4.2, which will mean any manager's looking to sell him and swap him for another 4 million defender can do so for a small profit, which I think everyone would take when Robertson finally does return. Okay, let's now discuss, I would argue, perhaps the most talked about team as far as injuries go ahead of game week 2. It's Man City, and that's because of the injury to Ilkay Gundogan. Of course, 7.5 million midfielder, blanked against Spurs, but a lot of his owners bought him in for this Norwich game, and he's not in your predicted 11, Ben.
Look, this is a tough call. This is a big call from me. Yes, Ilkay Gundogan has been pictured taking part in a small-sided game at Manchester City. So that's a good indication of his injury is not serious. The mechanism of injury and from, I suppose filling in the blanks, what we can ascertain is he probably suffered maybe a grade 1 strain of the AC joint in his shoulder. Typically what we'd be looking at is maybe a 7 to 10 day recovery period. Is it painful? Yes, it is. Can it be managed? Yes, it can be. So the question then comes, does Pep risk him against Norwich City? Or does he leave him out, maybe puts him on the bench, while you've got others to come into his place? We've seen the return of Kevin De Bruyne, minutes from the bench against Tottenham. Total surprise, he had no full training sessions in his legs. And to me, I wouldn't be surprised, given the fact that Manchester City lost that first game, if he threw Kevin De Bruyne straight back into that starting 11. And with Jack Grealish, fully fit, or certainly, better placed in terms of his fitness, and either Fernandinho or Rodri in, holding that central role, then to me, against Norwich, then I can see maybe Gundogan just sitting this one out, maybe on the bench. But good news in the fact that it's certainly not long term and he won't be far away from that starting 11.
Yeah, I think if Gundogan was the talisman for that side, you might argue he would be rushed back, but Pep has so many alternatives to pick from. It's very difficult to make a case for risking a player and potentially exacerbating an injury. How sure are you about Ferran Torres' starting berth there? I notice he's in your starting 11. Some people backing Jesus for a start, but he could be a decent short-term replacement for Gundogan.
How confident am I with any Pep Guardiola starting 11? Look, for me, and I've spoke about Gabriel Jesus on a lot of occasions, and if he's not getting anywhere near this starting 11, he needs to go. He's out of the shadow of Sergio Aguero. There are no more excuses Pep either believes in him or he doesn't. He feels that he can do the job and score the goals, or he can't. And the question will come down to maybe fitness in game week 1. So game week 2, I mean, this will be a true sort of barometer of where Gabriel Jesus, lies within the team. There have been some rumours, I would say, or speculation regarding a number of City players who aren't happy with the current situation. At least 3 players have voiced concerns about their status within the squad and would prefer a move. One of those being Bernardo Silva, the second being Aymeric Laporte, and the third reportedly was Gabriel Jesus. Now, you can take that as being, well, is he going to be a player that's out the door potentially if City manage to get the Harry Kane saga over the line? Or does Pep manage him knowing that, that maybe that move for Kane is a little bit unrealistic, and does he look to put him in there and keep him sweet and hopefully give him that opportunity between now and the next transfer window to prove himself? It's a tough call. It is a tough call.
Like pretty much every single one of these 11 players, apart from maybe with the exception of Edison and Diaz there, I don't think any are set in stone. Speaking of set in stone, no John Stones I see as well, Ben.
Yeah, again, I mean, Pep talks about fitness and how the players returned and this, that and the other. Stones could be one. We'll see how he's trained this week. I think the City lineup will definitely be one that you want to refer back to this working document closer to the time when we may have a little bit more insight into who's trained well, who's looking sharp, because we've got the likes of Kyle Walker and others who can come into that team as well.
Great stuff. Thank you very much. And across the city to Manchester United, started off the season incredibly well, and from what I can see here, Ben, no changes as far as you're concerned. Too soon for Rafael Varane, I guess.
Yeah, so he joined the squad this week, was unveiled as the official signing ahead of the Leeds game. Manchester United had a behind closed doors friendly on Tuesday morning against Burnley, a game they won 3-1. And for me, one of the biggest indicators and insights I gleaned from that was Varane wasn't part of that team. Jadon Sancho was, Anthony Martial was, building fitness and scored. And also Jess Lingard was also a part of that United team and scored. But Rafael Varane stayed on the training pitches, just focusing on working on his fitness. So again, coming off the back of that performance, I cannot see Ollie wanting to change things too much, and Varane may have to settle for a place on the bench, like I say, while he builds that base level of fitness up.
Brilliant. Okay, let's talk about your beloved Newcastle United. And again, not a huge amount to say here, Ben?
Yeah, I mean, the only biggest surprise, I suppose, come ahead of the West Ham game was Emil Kraft in that back three, playing centrally alongside Kieran Clark and Federico Fernandez, with Fabian Shaw and Jamal Lascelles both on the bench. It transpires that neither of those centre-backs were fully fit. Now, Steve Bruce said both players are around 7 to 10 days away from being match ready. Given the result and given how we were carved open by West Ham and Mikel Antonio, it wouldn't surprise me if Lascelles or Shaw was maybe thrown in to that back line. I certainly expect Joe Willock to start for Newcastle. He wasn't registered in time for the game, so I would expect Willock to come in and potentially he could break Alan Shearer's goal scoring record of scoring across 8 consecutive games that he's played in. So
wow,
fingers crossed. And yeah.
Wow, that's huge. Okay, interesting. God, he really was prolific at the end of last season, wasn't he? That must be it must give you cause for optimism, I suppose, Ben, as a Newcastle fan, that perhaps this will be another survival season. That's as much as you can hope for, isn't it, as we were discussing earlier. Norwich City, I mean, they are, we all expect them to be the victims this weekend, playing away at the Etihad. It's about as bad as fixtures can possibly get. Ben, I don't want to spend too much time here, but is there anything we should know?
I mean, the only Sam Byron is the only long-term injury absentee. So if we're talking COVID-related absence, tonsillitis, or minor knocks, everybody should be in and around that squad and won't be too far away.
Okay, excellent. Southampton, again, probably not the need for too much time on the Saints either. Lost 3-1 against Everton in game week 1. Some interesting prospects there. Adam Armstrong got off to a good start. One notable absence here, Ben, is that of their $4 million defender, Livramento. Why do you think he will be omitted in game week 2?
Look, I'm all... Southampton have lost Yannick Vestergaard, they lost Ryan Burton, they lost that experience. I think Ralph Hasenhüttl gambled with his selection in game week 1. We've seen the absence of Bednarek, Kyle Walker-Peters. We even seen Stuart Armstrong, out of that Saints midfield. And for me, I just think you need to... It's great bringing all these new signings in, but maybe you just need to blood them at the right time and not throw anybody in. At this level in this league, you cannot put a price on that experience of just being able to, to have an understanding of what you're up against. And I think maybe Ralph Hasenhüttl will revert more back to some of those more senior pros with the experience. I think Perrault will stay maybe at left back, but it wouldn't surprise me if we're seeing Walker-Peters back and also maybe Forster back in goal ahead of McCarthy.
Okay, and to Spurs now, where we see a similar lineup to that of game week 1. Son, of course, leading the line there. Do we know for sure that Kane won't be in the side? He's omitted from tonight's European fixture, isn't he, Ben? Does that extend to the weekend, or is there still a chance he could play?
No, very much still a chance. A strong possibility of Harry Kane actually making the matchday squad.
Okay.
But I think that's basically where it'll stay. I don't think Harry will get anywhere near that starting 11. He doesn't deserve to, and ultimately he won't have that level of sharpness in his legs either. So I'd be very surprised if Nuno didn't put him on the bench and he was maybe given a 10 or 15 minute run out.
Okay, interesting. So it could be the first time we see Harry Kane in action this season then. Eric Dyer as well. I mean, 4.5 million backline. We did include him in our best Spurs FPL players prior to the season start. Started in game week 1, kept a clean sheet. The fluent Portuguese speaker blossoming under Nuno. And let's see if he can continue to play well. Watford. Now, I have to admit, when we were talking before the video, Ben, I was quite cynical about spending much time on Watford. However, you did say that Kiko Femenia was one of the biggest names on your timeline at the moment in terms of frequency. So let's talk about him. I didn't realise he was so popular with FPL managers, but we should acknowledge his predicted absence from game week 2 starting 11.
Absolutely. I mean, Joel Ventman and Kiko Femenia were the two players that I had the most questions about regarding their remission. Surprise omission, I hasten to add, last weekend. Femenia had been struggling during the close season with a groin problem, but he did return and he was involved in some of those pre-season friendly games. However, a decision was taken that he wasn't quite ready for the rigours of Premier League football, so he was held back in game week 1 as a precaution just to get some more training in his legs, but he is ready, available. It's just whether he can break into that starting 11.
Okay, excellent. There you have it, folks. 2 more teams to go. Firstly, West Ham. Great to see Antonio surviving his first 90 minutes of the season. And, of course, Ben Rama performed incredibly well as well. West Ham really did what all FPL managers hoped they would do, which is that their template players performed well. Cresswell even managed to get on the score sheet too. Any injury news to report here, Ben?
Yeah, not massive amounts. We've seen the return of Angelo Ogbonna last weekend. He had been laid out due to a hamstring problem. The only outstanding injury that we currently have is Arthur Masuaku. And this is an ongoing, persistent knee problem going back to the surgery he had last season. There's a little bit of inflammation of fluid on the knee. He's working with the under-23s, but until we can really identify the underlying cause of this inflammation. You know, it may be, there's no timeline, let's just say, on Masuaku at this moment. You know, so he continues to train, and hopefully he won't be too far away.
Okay, and finally, Wolves. We saw the rather anticlimactic return of Raul Jimenez in game week 1, which was lovely to see. Whether you're a Wolves fan or not, I think we're all happy to see Jimenez back and playing football again. Again, Ben, probably not a huge amount of time that needs to be spent on Wolves, but anything that you want to add here?
Latest news: Pedro Neto was hopefully targeted to return in October. He's had a setback on the training pitches. Now we understand he won't return until next year now.
Wow.
Possibly February, the very, very earliest.
Big setback.
So that's it. Yeah, that's a big blow for Wolves. Better news with regards to Daniel Podence. He is on the training pitches, and he could come into contention maybe for game week 4. Similarly, Willy Bolly, hamstring, maybe game week 3, outside chance, but more realistic sort of game week 4.
Okay, Ben, thank you so much for your time. I know how valuable it is, particularly as we get closer and closer to the deadline. So hugely appreciated you coming on here and talking us through that. And like I said at the start of the video, FPL managers, if you do not know about this article that we're working through, get it in your life. It is a one-stop shop of injury updates, and like Ben and I have both said this video, it is updated regularly. So it is a living, breathing document. Of course, we record on a Thursday. Things could change. One more quick thing, viewers. We were talking before the video that Ben is looking to get rid of his beard during the international break. Do you reckon he should keep it or not? Comment below. Maybe if enough of you comment, we can get him to keep it throughout. I want you to look like Castaway by the end of the season.
Mr. Wilson.
Yeah. Callum Wilson. Right. Guys, thank you so much for tuning in. Remember, if you're not a member of the Hub, then do consider joining up. Even if you feel like it's too late, it's certainly not. You can turn any bad start you might have had around. Don't forget it. Also, I'm sure you're following Ben Dinnery on Twitter already, but if you're not, it is one of the best resources as far as up-to-date injury news goes. So go and give him a follow if you're not already, at Ben Dinnery. Right, Ben, good luck for game week 2. We will be back next week to look ahead to game week 3. Until then, have a good week, mate.
Yeah.
Viewers.
Likewise, James. Thank you.
Cheers for watching. See you soon. Bye-bye.